No more borders. While we're getting the next speakers mic'd up, which I guess they're not getting mic'd up, you can just grab mics on stage, it's fine. You can use that one. All right, so the next panel will be on founder stories, which is excellent. We're going to hear some amazing stories by the likes of Connor Murphy, who has a startup called DataHug, which he showed me by hugging me and said, I do data. It's pretty good. Hristo Chernev, who actually is doing TaxiMe, which a lot of you guys are using, I guess. Lovely app. And we have Vladimir Oane, who did UberVU back in the day, acquired by Hootsuite, and now has other ventures. And our lovely moderator, Yorno Ramp Fitzpatrick. Off to you guys.
Hello. So, we've got some awesome speakers. You guys have great experience. And would you just take, in like 30 seconds, what's the company that you're either currently or most recently working on? What's the deal here? Who are you?
Hi, my name is Connor. I enjoy long walks, commitment, and changing myself. I'm from Ireland. I started a company called DataHug. We hug your data. We specifically work out relationship intelligence. What does that mean? We analyze all the emails, the phone calls, the calendars within a company, not looking at the content, but to work out like a private LinkedIn, measured and scored relationships so you can actually sell better, sell faster by getting warm introductions.
Cool.
My name is Hristo Chernev. I'm co-founder of TaxiMe, and we take people places. Wherever you are in Sofia, we can take you to the next place by cab for the moment. We are now thinking of other helicopters and stuff like that.
I'm Vladimir, and I founded UberVU, and UberVU was a social media marketing platform, so we empowered marketing folks to understand what's being said about them on social media, Twitter, Facebook, and all these other platforms. So we were like an NSA for the marketing department. That's it.
All right. Now, if you want to just keep going, it's really helpful. It's confusing when you hear about startups because they all sound either great or crazy, and you don't really know where they're at. So if you're willing to share kind of what stage you're at, if you're willing to share revenue numbers or funding numbers, that would be awesome. If team size, like how far along is the business? What sort of stages are these at?
So UberView was acquired early this year by Hootsuite. So we had a pretty fun ride of 5 years. So when me and my co-founders started the company, it was 2008. Up to that point, there was no company who was doing any software outside of Romania. So we were the crazy people who said, look at all the people on TechCrunch, we could be just like them. And Seedcamp was the Y Combinator of Europe back in the day. So we applied to that, we won, so the company was founded in London, which created like a movement in Romania. A lot of companies went through incubators, accelerators, and a lot of startups happened after we were accepted. And the first 3 years of the company were focused on building the product, a product that somebody will use and pay for. I remember I was in San Francisco in 2010. I was in Discuss offices. You may remember Discuss, you may know Discuss as a commenting platform. We were using their offices because we didn't have money for an office in the Valley. And we noticed that they had like 10 copies of 4 Steps to the Epiphany on a shelf. And we're like, what the heck would you have 10 copies of the same book? And we're like, hey, you can have one, you should read it. And we did, and we're like, oh shit, I realized that we wasted like 2 and 3 years of our life pursuing stupid things. So we started talking to customers, changed the product, and stuff like that. We grew the company to 50 people, multi-million-dollar revenue. At one point, we were profitable, and we were growing pretty well. I think that's one of the reasons that we were acquired by Hootsuite. So yeah, I mean, right now I'm a product manager, so I run Hootsuite Analytics, which is pretty cool because I know that product very well. It's my old product. I'm part of a company that is growing even faster than my previous company. So UberVU is one of the fastest growing, Hootsuite is one of the fastest growing tech companies in the world right now. And I'm pretty happy to be part of the ride.
Awesome. Couldn't go better. Although we'll come back to the messy details of those 5 years. You know, I like how we just gloss over that in our stories. Yeah, then there were 5 years of work, and then everything was great. So we'll come back to that. But what kind of stage are you guys at?
Okay, so, well, I have this weakness. I don't remember large numbers, so I can't share any revenue. But we are doing quite well in Sofia. Looking back, I mean, we've tried different strategies, different ways. The first 150 drivers I have contracted myself, and then we have so far well, grown this number in probably more than 10 times. We have a lot of people, thousands of people traveling within Sofia with the app. We are experimenting with other markets at the moment. And yeah, that's about it.
And the team?
We have a team of 7 full-time people and a few part-timers.
Cool. It's bigger than mine. No. All right. And Connor, where are you guys at the moment?
Yeah, so DataHug started in late 2009 and kind of bootstrapped for 18 months. And our kind of first big break was when we launched and we got some attention. We won the Web Summit tech conference in Dublin. We won the Startup Awards there. And on the back of that then started a whole fundraising journey and figuring out everything from angels to seed, all the technicalities and the jargon and the language of investing. Made loads of mistakes there, but eventually finished that process by raising our first round of investment. Our first seed round, it was $1.5 million. And then growing the team and then beginning to build, figure out, are we sales, are we B2C, are we B2B, are we a platform play? And then growing the customer base, growing the team, and we since raised about $4 million in our Series A. And we've now 25 people in Dublin, New York, and San Francisco. We haven't exited yet in any way. Salesforce has become an investor, and we've kind of learned, again, similar, I think, to the Steve Blank book and Eric Ries, and I think I spoke outside and I mentioned Dave McClure and the R metrics, and there's so much you have to learn as a first-time founder, and I'm only now beginning to digest some of it and even begin to apply some of that. So there's a massive learning curve in just starting a company. And really focusing. I spoke about Normandy, trying to get your kind of your beachhead and your towhead. And our platform was so many different customers. We're now very focused on the Salesforce ecosystem and working with CRM providers as a platform install. And then as part of that growth as well, hiring a senior management team and bringing in like professional CEO in the US market, and bringing in like the former VP of services for Salesforce Europe, just joined us now as our worldwide head of sales. And then watching the company kind of transition from that 0 to 1 startup phase to kind of having figured out a business model now, and now we're entering that hopefully scaling phase.
Cool. So you guys are all doing great. Like you've exited, you've got a mature business, you're growing fast. Like these are all.
I think the definition of services is that you've either it's that valley of death diagram.
Yeah.
It's kind of you're either not dead or you're dead. So I'd say not dead is successful in startup world.
All right. So you guys are all fantastically not dead at the moment.
Well, there was this film K2, I think. They said above 5,000 meters, you're already dead. So we are dead. Eventually, we may live.
Or big success, one or the other, right? So if you can cast your mind back, and we were talking about like started in 2009, started like years ago, you guys have been grinding away at this for a long time to get it to this point. If you can cast your mind way back to the beginning, I would love to hear, you don't all need to answer, but does anyone like remember at the very beginning, what was the messy reality of your first few months in business? Like how did you get started? What was the first thing you did? Were there any early crises? How did you survive this? Why are you in business at all at this point?
It's a continuous crisis with some moments of happiness, but yeah, it's...
When you exited or before that?
Even like people think that when you exit, you're like, I don't know, drinking champagne and all the journalists are making cool pictures of you, like the Wolf of Wall Street, and it's not at all like that. When the news hit TechCrunch, it was a messy situation between all the people. People were frustrated. The website went down. Someone leaked some weird things to the TechCrunch editor, and our PR team was frustrated. Everyone was yelling. I didn't have like an hour of sleep in like a month or something, so I was kind of a zombie. So what people portray as successful startups and stuff like that is not at all reality. So the early days was, now looking back, was a big fucking mess. I mean, I'm so lucky to be here now and talk about my amazing success. I mean, we went to Seed Camp just because we wanted to go to YC, and I don't know, YC is too far away, so we got to Seed Camp. Was the only thing in Europe back then, and we were I think the only company who actually decided to move to London and to do the whole 3 months of Seed Camp in London, and that meant that we had access to all the Seed Camp network. So my first 3 months, I had like 3 or 4 meetings, meeting all these people that I've been reading about before coming to London. So I was meeting, I don't know, all the Skype founders and Sol Klein. We went to the US and we met all the Twitter founders. We had dinners with there. We thought we were on top of the world. And the problem with that is everyone has ideas about what you should do and what you should build. So after 3 months, we were 10 times more confused than when we actually won Seed Camp. No idea what we were doing. We didn't have a product. The product that we actually wanted to build when we started Seed Camp was not working. So it was a big freaking mess. But we were better than the rest of the teams. So we managed to raise some money and to keep on grinding it. But yeah, it's so funny because people back home in Bucharest were writing articles about how we had these amazing ideas in a garage and how we are reinventing everything. And I was in a small apartment in London, clueless about what the heck are we doing. But yeah, it was fun right now looking back, but back then it was stressful as hell.
Cool. So there's been a couple questions coming up onto the board. If you guys want to ask questions, you're more than welcome to. And you've all raised funding. A couple of you have gone through accelerators or incubators. You're with 11?
11, yeah.
11, which is local, and you know, great team. You went through Seed Camp. Did you raise follow-on funding?
Yeah, we raised a few $1 million. Yeah.
Just a few $1 million. You've raised a couple rounds of funding. So what was it like? The question is, did you ever have investors kind of screw you over? A decision you've made, something you decided to do with your business? How did you feel it was to work with investors? Did they help you go further? Were there difficulties? What was that like? Do you want to?
I could talk for hours. I think on investors, one thing you need to really realize early on is that it's people you're dealing with, and you hear about these firms, so it really comes down to the individual at that firm you're working with. So you have to understand that, and that dynamic, and then there's dynamics within those firms. How do those people work together? And they all have, might have different agendas and stuff as well. So that's one very important thing. I think with investors as well, you can easily screw yourself over as well with investors, and I've done that to a certain extent. I'm sure the founder screws over the investor sometimes as much. And what I mean by screw over is like you're not screwing over the investor, you're screwing over yourself, and you're selling this big expectation. I talk about there's 2 ways to raise money. There's selling the story and there's having the data where you can prove that you've delivered on the story. And at the start, we had to sell very much via story. So then you're selling this big story and you're saying, we could do this, and 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 you're kind of all over it, you're trying everything and you're hustling. And then the investor comes on board and they, that magical, amazing story you gave them, and now they're suddenly in your board and you're like, well, then you start talking about all the problems and there's this and I'm scared of this, I'm worried about this and blah, blah, blah. So there's always that like selling and then delivering. So you got to catch your data or your traction or your proof points have to catch up really fast with that story. So you're always kind of having that conflict between story and results and stuff like that. So that's something to be aware of. It's not always, and I can talk to the other side, but I think it's always fair to talk about, not blaming other people. I think the best quote I ever saw is the definition of failure is blaming other people. So you got to look at where you messed up as well, you know. But it's very much a first-time founder story as well. And like I had a great chat last night. There's so much negotiation goes on, and these investors, particularly the big VCs, they have lawyers who've done this 50 times. This is probably your first time doing it. So the advice I give to people, and something I didn't do at the time, was find really good advisors at the start, and you can get them through C Camp or through 11. They've been through it, and they're kind of on your side, you know. So it's a great thing to have as well, I think.
And what was you went through the accelerator relatively recently. Like, what was it like? Where has it led? How's your experience been?
So we have 11 and a bunch of private investors as investors in TaxiMe. Well, 11 was perfect. I mean, our story about 11 was a bit probably not the usual. I mean, formally we are from season 4, but in fact we were accepted in season 1, but we thought we were so great that we can do without them. Finally, we came back with our pants a little bit, not that, well, a little bit more brownish than, because it's also about speed. It's not whether we have the resources, because my partner and I believed we had the resources. Well, we did, because we were continuously working during that period full-time only on this, and we were moving forward, but we would have moved forward much faster if we had 11 on our side. Well, it's definitely worth finding investors. Even if you have the money, it's good to have to prove to an investor that your business is worthwhile. The very fact that you have managed to earn the belief of someone that your business is worthwhile helps you clarify the idea for yourself, the weak points. You shoot the ideas at people, and then they shoot back at you, and they shoot back really well if they have money at stake. So it's definitely worth having good investors in the company.
Cool. So let me change this up a bit. One of the, I think, questions that was on a lot of people's minds after yesterday is, we heard from Bob in the morning, and he said, in order to be successful, you need to commit 20,000 hours. You need to be working 80 hours a week for the first 5 years, or you're doomed. I mean, you've got a daughter, like you all presumably, you've been doing this for years, right? At some point you got to live, or do you? Like, what's your view on the, like, do you kill yourself for a few years, then go buy your island? Do you integrate the two? What's your view on work-life balance? What's it like to be running a startup from a personal perspective?
Well, you should definitely buy the island first, but if you can. Yeah, like at the start, it depends as well, and this is very important with your co-founders and your team, like how much pain are you willing to induce? And I have a good friend, he says, yeah, I can live like a cockroach, or I can live drinking champagne every day. So like, you need to be ready to go to the cockroach level. And I was doing that happily for 18 months, but then you have a girlfriend who then becomes a wife, and then you have a house and you have bills and stuff. There's certain outside pressures as well. So having a supportive family and friends around you is great.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, if you're doing a startup and the startup is doing well, or if it's not doing well, you need the support of your family, your spouse, or stuff like that. You cannot do that alone. But you can also screw up. So I'll take the question in another direction. Because you're working at the startup every day and every hour, you're showering, you're thinking about the startup. I know you're brushing your teeth, you're thinking about the startup. You will start to make a lot of mistakes because your life is your startup. There are two mistakes that you start to make. You realize, you identify yourself with the company that you're trying to create and to grow, and you feel like if the company is failing, you're failing. And that fear can paralyze you. You realize, like, oh my God, if this thing is not gonna work out, I'm done. Like, nobody will talk to me. I'm done as a human being. It's very hard to separate yourself and who you are from the company that you're trying to create. And the problem with that fear is you'll start to make stupid decisions. And the other thing is, because you're putting so many hours into it, you'll start to treat your coworkers as family. And that's also a very stupid thing to do. I mean, the goal of a company is to create a kick-ass team, not a family. I mean, family are the people who are staying there when you're down, and but the coworkers you need to fire from time to time, or you
can't fire your family. Like that's why the family analogy breaks down.
You cannot fire your family, exactly, but you need to fire some people from time to time, or to hire or to change when the going goes tough. You have to make some tough decisions, and if you identify with the startup and you think those people are family, a lot of things can go sideways.
Cool. So let's run with that. Oh yeah, I was just going to ask everyone else. Like, there's a question that came up on the board about kind of the biggest mistakes, and you opened it perfectly. Like, what do you feel that are the mistakes that founders typically made, or that you've made, or kind of anything in there? We've all done it, right? We mess up our companies at some point. I would love to hear your experiences.
I wanted to touch on the balance. I mean,
yeah, perfect, please.
Yeah, and so it's something that we usually, well, most ambitious people definitely fuck up with this, because, well, my background is in sales. I mean, the way salespeople greet each other is, "Hi, I'm better than you." So it's very hard to admit failure, or I mean, even admitting the thought that you may not succeed. And TaxiMe is the second startup that I'm doing together with my partner Hristo. And the first one, if it were not him, I wouldn't have been able so fast to admit that we have failed. I mean, I would have tried to conceal it and stuff like that. And thanks to him, I mean, I went there faster. Otherwise, I would have probably faked it until something else happened. But the fact is, it's worthy to accept and admit failure. Failure is an option. The quicker you fail, the quicker you'll succeed. And the fact that you say that the team is not your family, and well, I tend to disagree here, because you spend so much time with these people, and family is not only blood. I mean, it's esprit du corps. I mean, people are together to do something and to enjoy life together, because we spend more time with our colleagues than with our family, in fact, which is also sad from time to time. And this is something that I also wanted to touch. It's very easy to go down the slippery road of disbalancing your life. It's worth having a family. It's worth drinking champagne. Being a cockroach, as you said, is fine for a week or two, but it's a marathon. So don't fuck up your life. You need it. I believe it's very easy to go down there and believe that because I'm in sales, I'm strong, I can never fail, and I should never fail. I should do everything that I can to succeed. In fact, the moment you cut out your family, the moment you cut out, because I enjoy sailing, for example, the moment I cut out sailing, horse riding, all the things that make me who I am, I realized in fact that I have even diminished my chances of being successful. So it's, I mean, people say I'm proud, I cut out everything, I was a cockroach. Well, I'm not proud. I did it. It's not worthwhile. It even hinders you. I mean, in order to be good at what you do in your startup life, you need to have another life also.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, like, with my first company, we sacrificed everything for the company, and I think that was our biggest mistake. And now I take much better care of myself and much better care of my team, hopefully. And yeah, certainly I find that the more I enjoy life, like, the better my startups do, because you got to be excited to keep going with this stuff.
There's no one right and there's no one wrong in this scenario. Like,
no, I'm right, you're wrong.
But well, yeah. I was accused of being a sales guy recently, and I got very pissed off. I was like, hey, no, I'm a computer scientist and a product guy, and they're like, yeah, you did a good job. And not being a sales guy, or you don't realize that you're selling, but that's the passion. So for me, it's the alignment of, and as I look at other ideas sometimes as well, it's like, do I really care about this problem? Do I really care about solving this? Does this matter? and then I never looked at it as work. Yeah, you're doing all these hours and stuff like that. For me, the buzz is learning. I've always had learning, international kind of travel, new experiences, and working with great people. So like, they don't necessarily need to be a family to be great people and enjoy working with them. In fact, so like, it's not you don't have a social, you close the door on them and you're not involved. You care about your team, you want to motivate your team, you want to know what motivates them, what's happening in their lives. You have to know all of that. I wanted to talk about mistakes or regrets was, there was two really good friends I'd worked with before who I had massive respect for, and I hired both of them early on into the company. I convinced one guy to move from New York, and one guy to move with his wife, and one guy to move from Edinburgh and London, come to Dublin, and I was super proud that the guys came and did that. And like, one guy early on, it just, I really cared about what he wanted to do, and I said, because it was machine learning, I was like, yeah, we'll have an opportunity to do a lot of this, but quickly realized that was probably 5 years away. In fact, we're not even at machine learning yet, and we literally had to let him go after 6 months, so letting in a buddy and letting go, but it wasn't, he was almost like family in terms of a really good friend, but it wasn't the best for his career and it wasn't the best for me, and we actually helped him get a job somewhere else and stuff like that, because the best thing for the team was not having him in that position at the team at the time. And it was the best thing for him, it was the best thing for everyone. We're all very good friends in the back of it still now,
So, real quick, we'll go do a couple whirlwind questions here. Just real simply, like, where did you get your idea from? You're working on something, you decided to throw a few years into it, maybe you didn't, maybe it happened accidentally. Where did it come from?
I had the idea for 6 years. I sat on it for 6 years, but thought about it regularly, and then the pain kept coming up, and then eventually decided to act on it.
In my case, I had an agency before starting UberVU, and we identified this problem, and we thought we were the best people to solve it. So we were in touch with our potential customers, and we thought this is something that is already a problem and it will become a bigger problem. So who else is better to solve this than us? So.
Well, you don't need to spend a lot of time moving by random taxis in Sofia to figure out that if you combine good operations and technology, that you can fix that problem. So.
Cool, just living it. All right, and what about location? You mentioned you went over to London, then you went to San Francisco. You're really hooked into the Sofia ecosystem. You're now in Berlin. You started in Ireland. There's all these cities, and people talk about the top cities, like, oh, you got to go to San Francisco, you got to check out New York, Berlin's where it's at. You guys have seen a big chunk of the world. What's your view? Does San Francisco have an unfair advantage? Can you start a business elsewhere? How important is the local community? What's it like?
You can, definitely. I mean, we are all doing it out of San Francisco, so it is possible. I mean, our commercial office in the US was actually in Boston, not in San Francisco, but I spend a lot of time in San Francisco. So yeah, it is possible, but for certain types of businesses, San Francisco is the way to be. So for me, I mean, like, I haven't seen any hugely successful consumer company started in Europe, and most of the successful consumer applications happen in the Valley because there is where distribution can happen, and I feel like Europeans or yeah, we don't understand the value of distribution. I mean, all the companies that I advise in Bucharest right now are still in the mentality that if I build it, they will come, and my app is just as good as these other kids' apps. So I don't think San Francisco is a competitive advantage. So until we get to the point where we can distribute consumer applications from Europe, Silicon Valley will always have an advantage. But things are starting to change a little bit, I feel like. But yeah, if you want to do consumer, I would advise you to look at San Francisco, or at least US, New York. It's way better than Europe.
You couldn't start a Sofia taxi service from San Francisco easily?
Not for now. I mean, we're working on it, but so far unsuccessfully. So our business is, well, city-based. I mean, no matter which city you take, I mean, it's a local it's a local business. The previous startup that I worked together with Hristo on was a media business, so the epiphanies that I was getting when I was going to New York were well, tremendous compared to what I could get in Sofia or anywhere in Europe. So depends on the business, but it's definitely worth going to these hubs that well, can connect you to the right people. When I say people, I mean not only investors, but also advisors and people who can finally sell, I mean, buy the product, I mean, users and clients. So it's definitely worth going to where the heat is, not stay where you are. And yeah, I mean, it's good to focus on the clients, not on the product, because companies go bust not because they don't have products, but because they don't have clients.
I give the analogy, if you think of Silicon Valley, particularly before I went there, really, you got to picture it like as a kid when you're imagining going to Disney World. It's this magical kingdom. You're going to be walking the streets, they're paved with gold, and around the corners, every magical guy in a hoodie with billion-dollar exits, you know? That's the Mickey Mouse kind of.
But unfortunately, the exit was not that glamorous thing. I mean, they didn't drink champagne. It was a nasty day. I mean, you ruined my day.
Very depressing. And, but no, I can relate. But the reality is, like, when you actually really do get to Disney World, if you get to go there, there's like everyone else wanted to go to Disney World all over the world. So all of these people turn up. There's 4-hour queues to get onto the ride. You know, it's pretty expensive, blah, blah, blah. And it's the same as Silicon Valley. You get there, and there's 500 other startups who just arrived there that week, and you have to get attention. So there's some advantage with starting here in your home market, getting some. You're starting in London, starting in Dublin, starting in Sofia, getting some, depends on your business, but if you're like us, probably more enterprise, kind of get your first investors locally, your first few enterprise customers, but then it comes exactly down to distribution and scale. And also the America has something which I think is often forgot about. The appetite for risk with the customer is a lot higher, and they're, especially in San Francisco, big companies will write big checks for startups that don't even have products yet. So like just one simple story where we spent 6 months trying to get a customer in Ireland. And I remember just working our asses off, and we got like 6 months of hard work, $3,000. One meeting in the US, in 25 hours later, we sold 100K. You know, so like it's that scaling at the start, which will attract more investors, and you know, so depends on your business. But the US, is the buyer, not just the investors, are also open to taking more risk on a startup, which is very important in the enterprise space, particularly. And the final thing as well, Silicon Valley has something that has this angel investor network, which I think is actually so valuable to any ecosystem, because they have the advice, they have the expertise, they have the networks. And C-Camp was very heavy on connecting with angels or getting them involved. There's a pool of individuals who invested in it, so they all have a stake in your company and your success. And that can be very, very powerful, and that is something Silicon Valley has at a scale nowhere else has.
So you guys have all been doing this for a while. And we talk about the hard parts, right? We get stuck in, it's like brutal, and you deal with all this stuff, and you find a way to overcome. But what's kept you doing it? What's been like the most exciting thing that's happened in your startup? What was the moment when you thought like, man, it is all worth it for this? Like, what keeps you going? Why did you start a business in the first place? What's like the exciting bit? Because this is different than the rest of the world, right? You're doing something weird and special with startups. What is it that got you started and keeps you going in it?
I mean, the adrenaline is, it's wonderful. And you get like your daily dosage, and you hope that those will last for all the sorrow. So the moment you get your first customer, the moment you sign your big deal, the moment you, I don't know, you open a new office, or the moment when you sit next to a customer who's saying that your product is the biggest thing since sliced bread. I mean, those moments, I don't know, elevate you and give you like the energy to keep on going. So that part is very, very fun, and to have this feeling that I was part of all this. I mean, this whole thing exists because I decided to build it. It's an amazing feeling, for me at least.
Yeah, I'd add, like someone said, the highs are higher and the lows are lower, but it's definitely adrenaline. Like even last night at dinner, just talking to Vladimir, and we were talking about some negotiation, and he was like, you know, I hadn't done this negotiation, I got to learn all about it, probably read a few books, got everything ready, and you still got your ass handed to you, but you learn so much. Yeah. And I was getting adrenaline just listening to you tell the story, because I was remembering how everything I messed up, but for me, if I boil it down, it's this accelerated learning curve. And that for me is a personal buzz, and like I haven't come across an environment where the learning curve is as steep. And I always love to be like up the walls without, you know, like under pressure, deadlines being missed. I love that chaos rather than that kind of staring at the walls where you're like, oh God, is it 5 o'clock yet? Is it 5 o'clock? Can I get out of here? So up the walls, absolute accelerated learning. There's nothing like it from that point of view.
Well, it might sound too philosophical, but I think it's absolute freedom because you eat what you kill. And, if you kill nothing, you eat nothing. If you kill a lot, you may do some compote for, well, people here for next year. And I think this freedom that I feel in my heart and I have felt in the last 5 years of my corporate career, because I had a 10-year corporate career, and in the last 5 years I was all the time looking for the opportunity. I think it's really the freedom. It's not the money, because at least in my case, the money were much better before in corporation. It's not the, well, I recognized it as, in a way, power that, I mean, this is the product, I have built it, I can change it. I mean, you have this power in a corporation as well, and if you're smart, and I think most people here are smart enough to have a corporate career, you have greater chances of success in a corporation, but you're not free. Here you are free to fail, free to succeed, free to whatever. It's up to you and luck.
And you can get that adrenaline joining a startup. Like, I loved hearing your alumni. Like, can you just share where your alumni have ended up, people who've worked joining your early roller coaster?
Yeah, some of them actually started companies that were fairly successful. So some of the people that joined us in early 2009 decided to leave the company in 2010 and found a new company in Vancouver, and the Hootsuite founder decided to invest in them, and those guys were acquired by Twitter, and now they're millionaires. And we were making fun because it was just an acqui-hire back then. They got just stock in Twitter, and Twitter was worth $5 billion, so where can it go? I mean, like, can it go to 6? Nah, I mean, like, those guys are busted. And now, yeah, they're super successful. And we had other companies that are fairly successful. They keep on going. Even the people that left Hootsuite after the acquisition, they did so to start their own thing. So once a company is succeeding, you will see all these other companies being formed by the alumni of those companies. So that has a very big impact in the ecosystem. And yeah, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of, not just by the company that started out of UberVU, but all the change that happened in Romania, in London, because we were part of that scene. So that's great. I mean, a lot of the kids that are doing startups right now are doing it because they were inspired by our story. And I hope I didn't wreck too many lives, but if they are successful, I'll be super happy.
Well, I tend to disagree again. Sorry. I mean,
we're seeing a pattern.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to be successful, but success is something that depends on luck, the other word for God as well, which is, I mean, very good. But the moment of success is so small that it feels like it doesn't pay back all the efforts. I mean, if you do it for that moment, I don't know whether it's worth it. I really don't. I mean, for example, you said that you were successful with your first company and then not so successful. Was it the case?
More the other way around, but you know, they go up and down, right?
Yeah.
Well, like, success is personal to anyone's success. Yeah, I don't think you can agree on that, because, like, cheesy, but Bill Gates' definition of success is what he said was, and this is after you make $1 billion, maybe your definition changes. When I'm older, my kids will want to hang out with me. And I was like, oh, that's kind of nice.
Yeah.
So speaking of kids and advice and maybe tying everything together, like you have a young daughter. I mean, imagine that if you don't have a young daughter, imagine that you do. And you know, your daughter, your son's growing up, they're about to start their first startup. They're like, I'm just gonna do it. I'm going entrepreneurial, I'm gonna start my first company. And you're like, oh man, I'm trying to look out for you. I wanna give you good advice. What advice do you give to your kid who's about to start the entrepreneurial journey? Like, what's the lesson that you wish you knew to kind of prevent your big mistakes? What would you pass on in just a few words of wise wisdom?
I think doing a startup for the sake of a startup, it's a stupid idea, and I did that. I mean, you shouldn't do a startup just to do a startup just because you're following the Silicon Valley kids. You should do a startup because you're passionate about solving a problem and about, I don't know, making the world a better place, I guess. And the startup should be the vehicle that you're using to solve that problem. And I feel that that's a problem for a lot of the companies today. And if I have a kid who will want to do a startup, that's what I'm going to tell him, her to follow, to fix something, and if the startup is the right way to do it, to do it with a startup. If not, to do something else. I had a conversation with someone who wants to fix a problem, and he's obsessed about the startup. And I told him, I mean, it's not about the startup. Maybe you can write a book. Maybe you can, I don't know, go to conferences. There are other ways to solve this problem without necessarily doing a startup. So consider all the options. Startup, it's not a goal by itself. It's just a means to an end, probably. But yeah, focus on what the goal is. And also, I don't know how the world will look in, I don't know, 20 years. But I see a lot of people starting companies today just because they are hackers, because they know how to program, or they know how to design cool things in Photoshop, or do iPhone apps and stuff like that. I don't feel like that's important right now. I feel like domain expertise in a certain field is way more important than technical expertise. So starting a company just because you're a good hacker, it's probably it's a bad idea.
I saw a video by Paul Graham last week, and there was this exact question. If I wrote a letter to my 20-year-old kid as they graduated college, and his advice was, do not do a startup. And don't do it now. Mainly what he was saying is, like, go live for a few years, because the startup will take over your life. So you enjoy your 20s for a while. You know, people are going to be living, kids born today, they're going to be the first kids to start living to 150 years of age. So it's a long part of your life. So his theory was, enjoy your 20s for a while and then get into a startup, which was interesting. The other thing, I think, more from my point of view, is like, would you regret not doing this startup? Or like, is this, you know, if you look back, is this something that I'm so, like, I just want to give it a try and I'm okay with it failing, but I will really regret for the rest of my life if I don't try it. So the bigger risk in that scenario, it's basically risk management, and I'm a very risk-averse entrepreneur. It's like, the bigger risk is me not trying to do this right now. So actually, I'm de-risking it by giving it a go at the business. Kind of counterintuitive, maybe.
My daughter gave me a tattoo the other night. It's a heart and says, only trust your heart. So I think I have started receiving advice. But if I am to give back advice to her, well, I can sum it up with Shakespeare said it well. I mean, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of trouble, and by opposing end them. The startup is just heated up something that is taking arms against a sea of trouble, and by opposing end them. No matter whether it's in a corporation, whether it's in arts, whether it's in whatever you do, take arms against a sea of trouble, and by opposing end them.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. That is the end of the panel. Big round of applause. Thanks, guys. Yeah,
Thank you.
That is actually our panel.
Thank you to our lovely panel. Thank you, guys. Great founding talk. Loved it.
Thank you.